Hello everybody and welcome back to Juno New Origins, where we've been working on this planet visitor where we're trying to make a really cheap lander to go land on a bunch of planets to wrap this up. Because I feel like we're not really going to get any career contracts, we're not going to get any more progression contracts, and we're also not going to get any contracts, it seems, that are going to take us to any of the further planets. And I'd like to see those. Now, one thing to consider is that we could just launch this from the moon. How much would that cost? If we use the Luna launch site, that would be interesting. This would definitely make it into orbit from Luna, and we'd want to change around this engine for sure. To be honest, we might just want to drastically increase the amount of fuel in this tank and just run this from Luna. That might be the way to go, and change around its fair. We can think about that. For now, what would this cost from Luna? So this would cost 400 million to launch from Luna. Honestly, I think that's too much. I think we're so much better off launching from the launch pad, even with the extra DV that'll take. So to that end, I would like to modify this engine a little bit. So we know that we didn't have enough for this to make it into orbit, right? So one thing we could think about doing is just dropping this guy, or what is the cost of this engine? This engine is 3 million. Okay. Let's get rid of that. And let's think about a potentially very cheap liquid-fueled engine. So that would be something like a mage engine here. So this would be this is currently gas generator. That seems probably fine. So this thrust to weight would be 1.16. So this overall cost right now is 2.3 million. So that's definitely a lot. How do we want to deliver this? I really feel like... Do we feel like 1 million goblins are the way to go here? Honestly? Maybe. A max-size goblin here with the amateur power cycle would be fairly cheap. Fuel grain can be steady. We wouldn't even need it to be like this size, necessarily, right? If we have roughly 1 trillion of these, it could be something like this, and then we would have this be in radial x6 symmetry, and we just duplicate it out like this, right? And have roughly 1 zillion of these. They're very cheap. So we do something like that, and we're going to need a lot more of these than this if we want this to lift. But they're incredibly cheap. The question is, are they useful? Right? That's the question. Does this perform a useful amount of work? So to that end, this is 0.33. We can definitely produce a lot more of these. So that's absolutely fine. I wish these were by default in radial x6 symmetry, but unfortunately they're not. So it'd be something kind of like this, right? Where we're just going through like that. And the overall cost of this is 1 million at this point. This is 0.5 thrust to weight. So this is getting close-ish to the kind of thrust to weight that we're going to need to have. Emphasis on ish, though. Close-ish. So we're going to move this out over here and about like this, and then about like this. That didn't actually take the symmetry. There we go. It's not going to be absolutely perfect, but this is now 0.92 in terms of thrust to weight. So this is absolutely looking viable. Yes, this is a ridiculous number of engines, and deleting them is going to be a pain. No doubt about that. But we can do something like that. This can be in radial x6, and then this would be in radial x6. This is 1.15. Okay, so this would lift us off the ground, but not tremendously efficiently. To be clear, I don't think this is going to be efficient in anything except cost. That is what we are currently optimizing for here. Okay, so something like that would be 1.43. Now we could absolutely add, we could pack more of them into this. There's no doubt about that. But this would be 1.43. Now, as an interesting question, how much more would it actually cost if we added side boosters to this? So we would duplicate this, and unfortunately that didn't take all of those engines with. That's very unfortunate. I was really hoping that it would take the engines with. And then we can put on a hemisphere up here like that. And then we'd have to bring all of these in. Surely there's a better way to do this, right? If only we could just box select, Control-C, Control-V. Alas, I don't think there's a way to do that. So, I mean, we could do it this way. Let's, for the moment, get rid of this and just put this out on the pad. So it's a little higher on the launch cost, but it's way lower on the overall vehicle cost. So if we put this out on the pad, I wonder what the staging for this looks like. Oh, that looks correct. Okay, 70 degrees, and we're going easterly. So about like that. Okay, this is going to be a little low thrust to weight, but I'm wondering just how far this will carry us. What's the burn time on that? Okay, so the answer is 90 seconds. It's definitely a little loud. Attitude control issues. But those are manageable. We can definitely work with that. Okay, so significant attitude control issues there. Okay, all that said, we're taking some overexpansion damage here. Yeah, you can see the shock diamonds. This isn't that frightening, though. This is not surprising at all. So for right now, this is actually an interesting result. Now, we definitely had some issues where we got too much horizontal speed and not enough vertical there because it was tipping over. That's very manageable. I'm not concerned about that. We can just slot in some fins down here and no big deal. So all that would mean is we would do like 4 fins down this direction, like so. I'd have these be at like 45-degree angles, like this. We would move this guy back to be basically straight up and down like that. We'd add in a control surface, and then we would do radial X4. So that'll give us a lot more stability and control there. And we can actually relaunch that and see what altitude this brings us to. So this is going to be... Okay, now we're going easterly. Okay, cool. So let's launch that, and let's go into 2x speed. Okay, now as we speed up, these will get more and more effective. You can see right now they are not particularly effective, and we also picked up a roll there. Okay, this really wants to go downward. Intriguing. We could launch it straight up. That is definitely an option. So if we retried this and launched it straight up, we could just see what kind of altitude we can get out of this as a singular stage. And then once we build up some speed, we can head over when the fins will be more effective. So obviously our thrust to weight is low at this time. The plan is to have some very cheap side booster stages as well. So that'll boost up our thrust to weight considerably. But what I'm wondering right now is just how high up is this going to take us? Like, that's a fair amount of dB in this stage, for sure. Okay, so that's a decent apoapsis there. I'm going to try pulling us over to 45. Now, we're going to have a hard time actually making it to 45, to be clear. We're in ramp down at this moment. And yeah, you can see our apoapsis quite high up there. No overexpansion damage. Okay, let's put this at about a 15-degree pitch. We would need to build up a lot of lateral speed. So the lateral speed is obviously going to be the primary difficulty at this point. We would want to be tipped over a fair amount more than we did there. That would just be a matter of dialing that in. You can see here time to apoapsis going down quite quickly. Our orbital speed, not fantastic at this point. We would want to be significantly further along when we get to this stage. This stage is intended for final orbital insertion and some early orbital mechanics like escaping Drew, right? Would be what this stage would be ideally utilized for. So that would be the idea there. Now, what I'd like to do, is there a hotkey where we can copy this and everything on it? Hang on. Yes. Control right-click. Copies the stage and everything on it. Beautiful. That is really good to know. So with that in mind, we can then do... In here, we need a side interstage. And I would put this at a 90-degree angle, like that, and then just deposit that right on top of it like so. We can put a hemispherical fuel tank up here, make sure that it has some solid fuel here. There we go. So that'll be fine. This will actually burn longer than this center stage will at this time. So that's not necessarily ideal. We probably want to dial down the length of this down to maybe around 12 meters or so. We're going to have some potential thrust to weight issues here as well. We're going to have to see about figuring out exactly where those are going to be. What do I want to be under? This. I want to be under this because I want to move this guy down just ever so slightly like that. Okay. Now, if we did this in quad symmetry, what would that do to the overall cost? And I want that to be this done in quad symmetry. That's 2 million in mirror. Okay. So this is very laggy because that's a ridiculous number of engines. And that's understood. Okay. So that's only 2.7 million there. So if we were to ditch these guys and only keep the fins on the internal sections, right? So like that. That'll save us a little mass and a little money. Not much. And this is a ludicrous number of engines, for sure. These should burn out faster than this by a small margin at this time. So what I want to do now is... Interesting. Right. This is set up so that all of these are activating after these exit. That's probably okay. Yeah, I kind of like that. So if we save this craft for now, this is 2.7 million to launch, and then it's going to be about 5 million on the pad, so it's still under 10 million. That's really not bad. That's quite economical for what we're trying to do with this. And let's see about getting this into... What was that noise? That sounded like a contract completion. Oh, it was an achievement. A complex puzzle. Launch a craft with more than 1,000 parts. Okay, sure. Now, as you can see, the frame rate, not loving what we've got going on here. Yeah, understandable. Let's take this over to... I'm going to put this at 85 to start with. And we'll see how that feels. Now, this frame rate is going to be spicy. No doubt about that. Oh, my. That's horrible. The way that the audio cuts in and out, oh, that's awful. Okay. Let's, for the moment, let's mute the audio. Okay, so no audio for right now. Once we detach these stages, it should be fine, right? So that's okay. We can see that we're at a thrust to weight of about 1.5 right now. Now, having this center stage here being SRB is going to be interesting for orbital insertion purposes. We'll see how that feels. What I'm hoping here is that this ends up being slightly below orbital velocity when we kick into this engine, and then we have the last like 50 meters per second or so on the liquid-fueled engine. That would be ideal. I don't know how realistic that truly is. So that's definitely noted. So at this point, we need these guys to go away, right? The sound was definitely problematic. I'm actually going to turn the sound slightly back on. Let's have this be somewhere around like 10%. No, that's still kind of awful. Yeah, it is. I think we're going to have to keep the sound muted for now until this stage is burnt out. Which I just accidentally staged it. That was my own fault. No doubt about that. Let's pull this back then. So lessons learned on that one, on the way that the sound works. This is definitely a different lag issue than KSP has. So in KSP, when you have lag like this, it doesn't cut the sound in and out like that. It's just a low frame rate. And that's definitely a better solution. To be clear, I'm deeply unsurprised that this has a low frame rate. The number of engines on this is absurd. And this was done for cost optimization, right? Not for any other purpose here. So that is absolutely understood. Let's get this lifted off. And are we going to the east here? Yes, we are. Okay, beautiful. So let's get this lifted off, and we're going to want to move this over to being at the 70-degree marker fairly soon. I think I'm going to wait until we're at maybe like 150 meters per second of surface velocity here. Although in orbital, that's going to be a little higher. Maybe like 250 orbital velocity. Something along those lines. So that'll be fine. And we can see our apoapsis currently chilling at a cool 2.5 kilometers. Definitely needs to come up a bit. So this is definitely insanity in pursuit of low costs. No doubt about that. That's exactly what we've got going up on here. So I'm going to move us over now to that 70-degree marker, and we'll see if we're able to hold attitude there. That'll be interesting. This is a little more turned than I was hoping to be, but sure, this is actually kind of perfect. Kind of perfect. Okay, so we can see we're at about 45% fuel on this first stage. Everything is looking quasi-okay. Thrust to weight is looking decent. Apoapsis at about 11 kilometers. We're holding attitude here. That's a good sign. So I'm going to continue to burn here until our apoapsis is about 20 kilometers, at which point we'll head over to the 45-degree marker. You can see our lateral speed definitely increasing here, but it's mostly vertical that we're getting at this point, which is, of course, fully expected. But at this juncture, I want to bring us over to a 45-degree pitch. And let's see if we're able to hold this attitude. We should be able to. Ish. We're holding it ish. The good news is we are almost out of fuel for this ridiculous number of boosters. So we're definitely going to, I'm going to try to turn the sound back on as soon as we ditch these, or maybe like right now. It's going to be obnoxious, no doubt about it, but let's crank this back up. I'm actually going to leave it at like 30% because I'm a little concerned. Yeah, see, that's what I was concerned about. So we'll leave it at 30%. These are almost burnt out. They are now burnt out, and off we go. Frame rate is immediately much better. So that's phenomenal. So at this point, our time to apoapsis is holding. I'm going to put us at a 15-degree pitch here. Going up. Okay, we're having a hard time actually changing our attitude for the moment, but that's not surprising. Going up, I'm going to drop us all the way down to a target pitch here of 0. So you can see our orbital velocity definitely going up here, and this is looking decent, actually. I'm just thinking about how much DV we've got in this, how much we're going to lose to drag. This isn't quite going to push us up into orbit, but it's going to be very, very close. And this stage would be able to put us into the last few hundred meters per second, most likely. So at this point, I'm actually angling us down a little bit because we're not holding directly on axis. This is a little too much down. Let's try about 5 degrees. Yeah, that's approximately correct. We're going to be burnt out here fairly soon. We've got about 10% fuel left. I'm just going to leave us on a pitch of 0. And we'll just continue to burn here for now. And I think we may enter our coast phase at this point. So if we did a coast phase here, hypothetically, what would this end up looking like? Okay, so that's pretty significant DV still needed here. 765. It's doable. It's definitely doable. Okay, let's go ahead and run that quick. And we should probably extend our solar panels. There we go. This is electric, right? I'm pretty sure the Wyvern engine is an electric pump. Yeah, using kilowatts. So that's understood. How are we doing on battery? About 70%. So that could be a concern going forward, our battery levels. Doesn't seem too bad. So it's about a 2.2 minute burn time. I think we could definitely soup up that first stage a little bit more. Yeah, we certainly could. It's going to have some performance issues, no doubt about that. This is viable at this point. This will get into orbit, but I'm going to pull this back one more time here. And what I want to do is I want to add a tiny bit more burn time into these tanks here. So we could theoretically extend this up quite a lot, right? But I want to be in stage 1 here. I want to keep an eye on this starting thrust to weight. It's currently 1.61. Okay. I'm going to bring this to about 15 meters in length. And we'll recap these. 1.38 thrust to weight. That's not great thrust to weight there, but I think that will result in us going a little bit further. It will be a little slower off of the ground, but we'll have a longer burn time. And the trade-off there is 2.24 kilometers per second. Well, actually, we should be at ground level here. Okay, that's a bigger problem. 1.13. Noted. I'm going to bring this back down. I want to see what we were at. Okay, just drop these down. I know it's laggy. There you go. Okay, so let's see here. 1.25. Noted. We could boost up the size of this single center rocket engine. That'd be hilarious. I don't think that's a great idea. We could pack a few more engines onto this. I would rather not, but we definitely could. So we could move this guy down, like over here. Hang on. Oh, they're inheriting symmetry now. Okay, that could be problematic then. In that case, we probably don't want to do that. And if we wanted to boost the power, we maybe would add additional ones of these, which would, you know, further tank the performance. So that would be a potential issue. We may just have to say, you know what? This is pretty decent as it is. I still want to bring this up to about 15. So 1.66 up to 1.83. So yeah, that's more DV there, and our thrust to weight is going to be low to start with. We could combine these burns together, but I think that's going to be too high of a too high of a thrust to weight. definitely something to think about there. It is time to put a cut in here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and next episode, we'll run a quick test of this craft. I think that we're getting very close to the very cheap final design of this. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Andy McGar, Dark Horse Xenocyte, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, The Lounge STL, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.